Good evening and welcome back to my stream of OpenXCOM, my mod Equal Terms. This is going to be a bit of a different episode than the ones I've been doing so far. This is episode -3, where I'll be explaining why I decided to go with this game, the 1994 XCOM, as it's been re-implemented in this open source version called OpenXCOM, rather than the reboots such as XCOM Enemy Unknown from 2012 by Firaxis, or the newer XCOM 2, War of the Chosen. And I think it'd probably be best to illustrate some of the differences between the games briefly. So this will be mostly just me talking, showing a few things, and showing why I keep returning to this game despite the graphical superiority, the superiority in customization, and really it all comes down to, well, I gotta do a few things here first. It all comes down to tactical options. More than anything, this game gives you a granularity of options, both in tactics, in research, and in large portions of the game, because it comes from an older style of game and deeply within the 4X type of game. But I'll explain more of that in moments here. So I'm going to put everything back to normal here, as close to, yep, perfect. So let's start a new game here, just so I can have it in the background while I talk. So, for those who have watched my other episodes here, you can see that this is the standard base layout. I'll explain why this is bad in another episode, but this is disastrous for trying to get anything done, especially considering base defense. But again, one of the reasons I really love this game is that it came from a company called Microprose. It was originally made by Jonathan Gollop, who created a bunch of games for the Spectrum ZX, which is an older, hey cat, which is a 8-bit machine from back in the 80s that was real popular in Europe and not so popular here in the States. Microprose is a publisher that's been known for putting out, well, they're most known for publishing the Civilization series. Civilization 1, 2, which kind of created the whole 4X experience. So, one moment here while yeah, the 4X games are built in the ideas of exploring, expanding, exploiting, and exterminating. And Civilization was the penultimate version of this game, and people, including myself, all lost thousands of hours in playing Civilization. They also published the games Master of Orion and Master of Orion 2, which are also 4X games. So a lot of their games are known for having this depth of gaming and just one more turn style play. But they also published a large number of role-playing games of various sorts, flight simulators, military simulators. And when Jonathan Gollop first came, oh, there we go. Good morning, Crift. Oh, good evening, more like. Hey, Sniffs F Thud, and hey, Catastrophe Black. You've made it as well. As I was saying, this is going to be more of a boring podcast-style episode, where I'm just going to be detailing why I'm playing this old game rather than the 2012 XCOM game or the 2016 XCOM 2 game. And also kind of speaking to how some of the older fans of the XCOM 1994 game weren't really satisfied with the XCOM 2012 game, despite the numerous improvements. And as I stated before, it's about that varied and granular experience, but also the fact that XCOM is big. It's not big as in lots of hours or in scope of story. It's a big game as in it has many disparate elements that, while some might not consider them a cat's attacking my hand, consider them part and like essential to the XCOM experience, other people do. So back to the game here. XCOM has like at least 7 different aspects to it. You have the base design and management, which I'm looking at right here. And then we have globe management, which, oh, I had to rename the base now because I clicked on it. Yeah, the globe management, the geoscape, where you have to decide where you're putting your bases and how you're going to want your radar coverage to cover the map. And then the other important part, you have your soldier management. Generally, your soldiers are pretty trashy in the base game, and you'll have to do a lot of recruitment and sacking in order to get some good soldiers. So figuring out how those abilities, like this person's got pretty poor time units, good bravery, and okay firing accuracy. See, this one is the soldier. Whereas this one with more time units and worse accuracy, you might have this person just be as a grenade thrower. Again, I'll cover this in the basics of XCOM in the next episode. But time units briefly are how many actions you can take in a turn. Shooting a gun takes a certain percentage of your time units. Moving takes a certain flat number, 4 to 6, depending on terrain and whether it's a 45-degree angle. It'll take up that amount of time units. Standing, moving stuff from your backpack or from your belt into your hand. All those take time units. Again, it's a granularity that you have all these choices, and all these choices add up. And then, ducking back here, you have your research. And in the base game, when you first start the game, you can research motion scanner, medkits, and laser weapons. So, what's more important? Healing wounded soldiers? Although, the number of soldiers you're going to have wounded without armor is going to be very low. Having a motion scanner, which is difficult to use but can see through walls, or starting to sprint on producing laser weapons, so you might get away from using the very, very poor gunpowder weapons. No, that's fine, Catastrophe Vac. He says, feel free to ignore me if I'm too distracting. No, it's perfectly fine. So you had that choice, and then once you've researched things, you have to start producing things, which you can't do right now because I have nothing researched, and figure out how many engineers you have, how many you want to devote to each project if you have multiple things on the go. Okay, Cat, that's perfectly fine. And I'll have to remove that spammer later. But another aspect here is equipment procurement and management. You can buy everything. You can buy soldiers, engineers, scientists. You can buy, well, I can't buy a Sky Ranger Interceptor because my hangars are full. Watch why I try. See, no free hanger. Or what kind of weapons you want to equip on there. The reloads. What kind of tank you might want to have to replace some of your soldiers. And then all the individual weapons. They don't come free, unlike the newer game where you just assume to have an unlimited amount of pistols, rifles, heavy cannons, whatever it might be. So you have to manage the inventory. And then once on the soldiers, see if it's going to let me do that. Yeah, it'll let me do it. You got to figure out which soldiers go on and then manage the individual items in their backpacks. And for some people, that might just be drudgery. But, I mean, in a lot of ways, I consider it drudgery. But there's a whole stack of games out there that are popular right now. They're first-person shooters that are all about survival and inventory management, such as Tarkov or the older Stalker, where you had to loot quickly and figure out what items you want to put into your backpack and where you want to store them and where's the quickest way to get to them under fire. Where this is more of a turn-based game where it's just costing you time units to move things around. In these first-person shooter games, that drudgery has a very direct effect on what's going on, because you might be busy looting while someone's coming up behind you with a shotgun. So that's another aspect to it. And then one of the more important aspects of the game is the actual missions on the ground. So I'll just go abandon game here and pull up something that's only available in OpenXCon and go directly into battle here. In this, you don't have a very nice 3D scrollable camera type view of what's going on. But what you do have is a map that's open and full of aliens that are all doing different things. I'm going to kill the sound here for a moment, and I'm going to pull up a video from another source to kind of show you what happens in the newer XCOM. So, down quick. Moment here, please bear with me. Okay, this is a video from YouTube from Take-Two. Take-Two is the publisher of the newer XCOM games. The developers are Firaxis, who were the developers who moved on from Civilization onto the later Civilizations Past 2. And this will show you one of the major differences between the older XCOM game. Yeah, a lot of... If that Flood says, that's not my idea of fun either. I like watching the numbers pop up. Ugh, let me get to killing things. Yeah, for a lot of people, that's how it is. But in this newer XCOM game, the way they organize enemies, as you can see here, you have a soldier here, you have their hit points, you have various icons here, what their movement is. Their movement is broken down into a very simple D&D, like a 3rd edition D&D style of game. You have 2 actions, 1 and 2. You can either spend 1 of the actions on movement, 2 of the actions on movement, and move further, move then fire, and in some cases, fire then move. Only if you have certain character traits can you fire then move. So instead of having this granularity of selecting how you want to move and how you want to fire and how you want to manage your inventory, you just have this simplified 2-action system. But right now, I'm going to put play on this, and you're going to see what happens and how this newer game handles enemies. So they move their soldier up into this trailer here, and soldiers in this game, enemy soldiers, are organized in what they call pods. They cluster around these little drop pods here, and they don't move and they don't act until you see them. And then once you see them, you can never really ambush them. They're always going to be able to run for cover, set up firing positions. You can never, ever get the drop on them. Here's a second pod. That was right here. And what the game becomes in the 2012 game is 90% of the tactical metagame becomes managing the number of pods you've activated. So say you start swinging this guy around here, try to get a flank position on here. You might open up another pod of 3 or 4 enemy soldiers and have to deal with them. It's not that the enemies were doing something over here. They're just around the pod waiting for it to happen. So managing your number of contacts has a huge aspect of the newer game. And it's one of the big complaints you hear from older players, like my friend, I'm trying to think of his code name now, but my friend Tony, he absolutely hates the pod system, and I don't like it either. You learn to work around it, but the main thing on your mind whenever you're playing these tactical battles is, how am I going to manage these pods if I start moving around? So jumping back here. Put the sound back up before I forget about it. There we go. So once again, in this game, you don't have pods. You have enemies doing various things while you move around. Yeah. Also, the number of soldiers you can take on a mission in the newer XCOM is 4 to 6. You can get mods that increase that up to 8 or 10 or whatever. But yes, you play with a lot less soldiers. And you can't really manage. You can't take on too many enemies at once. You really have to take it slow. Whereas in this game, once the enemy makes contact with you, I'm going to end my turn here. Once you make contact with the enemy, they're going to start moving towards you, or towards the contact they can see. As you heard the doors opening, you heard movement, and here's an ethereal. Up a little more. The enemies are all doing... Yeah. Which is a very good point there, Existential Man. It does create a much tighter design space, and certainly the developer has a better handle on the potential scenarios. But it makes it feel so much more less tactical and more... The tactics of combat, like in real life, but the tactics you use on a battlefield are now less about, movement and sweeping of a field. And it's more about, in the newer games, managing those pods. You don't want to activate too many pods. Whereas this, as soon as this guy sees me, everybody inside the UFO is going to start moving. There might be some guys over here patrolling, and depending on their intelligence score, they're going to start moving towards the sound of combat and towards the context. Whereas in the newer XCOM, sometimes you do have missions that have a time limit, but a majority of them you don't. So you can just sit there and wait. You can take your time, move up, and that was a big change in the newer XCOM. XCOM 2 was all the missions have some sort of time limit. And yes, Criff, there's a huge amount of decision making outside the missions in the older game. Yeah. Even the bad outcomes, you can prepare for them next time. Yeah. And that's the thing. It's tighter constraints and less granularity traded for more, I wouldn't say bang for your buck, but more dynamism in what the characters can do. In this game, there are no classes. In the XCOM game, there are classes which limit your weapons and give you special abilities. They have cooldowns. It's the RTS side of the game and the Warcraft side of the game filtering into this turn-based game. And, I mean, to be honest, they put off putting out the newer XCOM game for years because they thought that, people have moved beyond the slower style of gaming. That, no one would have the patience anymore for a turn-based game. And, considering how many millions of copies they sold, and probably everybody rebuying it right now on the Switch, it's nice to be proven wrong, and it's nice to have the reboot. But a lot of us keep coming back to this game because it has that older school feel, that where you have so many options, where you can easily get, decision paralysis because there's so much you could do, or you can easily make a small mistake of not... I'm going to use a cheater weapon here, which I shouldn't use. Oh, not enough time units. Where you could easily make a very small mistake in movement or firing. That can make all the difference here. And that comes up to the Equistential Man. He says he considers it less like an RTS than I would like board games. Yes, the newer games do have a lot more board game feel. Where this feels more like more like old school wargaming, where you'd measure things in a map and you'd have certain amount of movement in inches. Yeah, Chuck says FTL feels a lot like XCOM but simpler. Yeah, it's also real-time strategy. But one of the other things in XCOM is the newer XCOM is you only have, other than using class abilities, you only have one style of firing. There is no aim shot, snapshot, auto shot. Each weapon just has a fire option. And again, that's the older granularity, that older style of gaming, where do I want to move a lot and just take one snapshot with reduced accuracy? Do I want to get that at 22 time units, get the 3 shots of the auto shot at 15% and hope I get somewhere nearby? Like, none of these guys can fire right now because they don't have any time units. At least do a snapshot. Yeah, see, 35% versus 58%, where I could fire this twice in the time it fires this once. So, is it a good idea? I'm going to totally hit the tank. Yes. And, again, it's granularity. It's the tactical options, the much deeper feel to the game at the expense of the dynamism of having classes and class abilities and not having less things to track. And yes, I'm going to end a turn here, abandon game. Go back to the map, let it play here and talk a little further. So, when some people say, they don't like the new XCOM games because it doesn't feel like XCOM, it's because there's a lot of stuff that makes up XCOM. In XCOM 2, you can only cover a continent, whereas here you're down to the pixel as far as what you want to cover on the map. Do I want to make sure I get Labrador here and Newfoundland, or do I want to make sure I get some of Alaska here? Whereas it's just a binary choice. Am I covering North America or not? It's just a lot more decisions. And Chris says, like MMOs, the more decisions you make along the way, the more attached you are to the final result. Yes, and I agree. Whereas in the newer reboot games, a lot of those smaller decisions have been simplified, and I won't say dumbed down. I know a lot of people love to use that term, but you make fewer decisions, more chunky decisions that have a greater impact, more binary than a float. I'm familiar with the programming term. It's not a matter of decimals and single numbers. It's yes or no in the new XCOM. Going back to my notes real quick here. And I mean, that's why I keep coming back to this game. And then once they put out the extended version of this game with deeper modding options, I was all in. I made sure to grab my earlier version of my mod that I put out on yes, Echo Stetchman Man says you make more focused decisions. Yes, you absolutely do make more focused decisions in the 2012. And for some people, playing this almost 4X style game where you have 1,000 little decisions is what makes XCOM to them. Whereas other people, they see it as a whole. Am I fighting aliens? Am I doing research? Am I fighting against the right type of aliens? Am I fighting sectoids and ethereals and such? So, can't say they're wrong, but it depends on how much weight you put on yourself on the various aspects of the game and how important it is to you. Griff says, old XCOM classes were more organic sense. You Stronger characters can wear heavier armor and big guns. Brave characters grab a med kit and anchor the team without going nuts. Yeah, exactly. That you assigned roles to soldiers based on what you saw in their stats, or as I'll explain later in how to play the older XCOM. Sometimes you just have trash soldiers and you use them as a meat shield or use them as scouts just to get shot up and thrown in a casket. That's a way a lot of people played this original game. They'd have their hero soldiers in the back of the Sky Ranger and their meat up in front, and they just run out the recruits out there to get shot up. XCOM does that for you, which makes the missions more accessible at the cost of an investment. Yeah, the cost of investment. And do you like to make big decisions, or do you like to make constant decisions? Do you want to build a sandcastle, or do you want to play with Lego bricks? Oh yeah, Equistenchman. That is dark, but that's how a lot of people played. I mean, I know my friend in Indonesia, other buddies, Satan on a Stick. That's how they played the game. They'd call them Meat 1, Meat 2, Meat 3, Meat 4, so they can keep track of them. The new ones TJN says the new ones at a macro level feel more like a race against the clock than a strategy game. Yeah, absolutely. It's the board game thing. You have this many turns to beat the board game. Yes, and Sips Ethics. I like those time limits. Things get crazy. Yeah, I think I've played 300-400 hours of the new XCOM. I do love it, but there's still some things that this older game, I mean, the game that all started it all, does better still. At least for me. EcoSnatcherman says, even the character design style is kind of like miniature figures. Everything is big and bulbous and visible at a distance. Yeah, big and chunky, doesn't look super realistic, but does look like it's carved out of plastic. Very good point. A bunch of cheap miniatures you find in a board game. Chuck says, I just have too much empathy to meet shield out soldiers. It's probably why I never got far in Final Fantasy Tactics. And that's another great game. And that's a game, again, of smaller teams, so you don't have to meet shield, but you definitely have to know the game very well to avoid taking losses when you really shouldn't. Yeah, that's a game. That's another turn-based game I've played way too much of. The original, the metagame, Earth is in charge. Governments are intact. Yeah, that's how it is in the reboot too. Is that the governments are in charge, and it's in this game. It's also revealed that obviously the aliens don't have enough firepower and soldiers to just conquer Earth. And that's kind of revealed later in the game. Like, it's not made explicit, but they're looking to terrorize Earth enough to get it to surrender. But that's also in the XCOM, the reboot. And I mean, the XCOM 2 game isn't actually based on any of the later XCOM sequels from the 90s. And actually it's based off a really brilliant idea that they said that only 7% of people beat the game on a medium difficulty or higher in the reboot. So they just assumed that you're going to lose the war against the aliens, and that's where XCOM 2 starts, which is another great game, but still has its flaws with the pods and the big decisions and, less tactical options replaced with dynamism, even more dynamic decisions than even the first game, because the classes are even wilder. So yeah, that's why I keep coming back to this game, because I prefer that more 4X game, 1,000 little decisions, and also like Tactics, I know the game inside out, and it still has room to surprise me, especially with the new mods like that cruise ship and new maps. And people are talking about tactics and Final Fantasy tactics and yelling and throwing rocks at each other to get experience. And I guess that is a caveat. When I play Final Fantasy Tactics now, I play with cheat codes, so I don't have to grind. It just keeps your job points always at the current job point number, so you can just get. You don't have to spend forever grinding, because I'm over 40. I don't have time in my life to grind anymore. Just not going to happen. So yeah, I'm going to take a short break here, and I'll be back in about 5 minutes, and I'm going to do a longer explanation of why equal terms. And I'll show, and that'll be episode -2, and I'll show what's going on in the base game compared to what I've changed and put in my game. Thanks everybody for watching. I know it's not a super action-filled stream this time, but things will not go boom yet. I'm sorry to say. But things will go boom before the night is out, we'll say. Everybody, have a good night. Be safe. And make good decisions. Good night. And see you in about 10 minutes.